Hello scholars and welcome to Mr. Chambers Teaches HMH into Math for 5th grade. Today we are working on Module 1, Lesson 4. These are pages 17 through 20 in your Unit 1, Module 1 through 9 workbook. In this video we will review the objective, spark your learning, build understanding, and step it out problems for this lesson, and a few select questions from Check for Understanding and On Your Own for review. Feel free to skip around in the video to help working on the particular problems you may need help with. Today, we are on Lesson 4, Multiply by One-Digit Numbers. Our objective for today is that I can multiply multi-digit whole numbers by one-digit number using regrouping and place value. To start off, we're going to be doing the Step It Out problem. Number 1. Ada walks 1,274 steps once around her neighborhood. If she walks around her neighborhood 3 times, how many steps does she walk? The first thing is asking us to estimate the number of steps that Ada walks and to show our work. When we are estimating, we are quickly rounding up a number to the nearest thousands or hundreds place. The number in question is 1,274. This could round to 1,000, or if I'm rounding to the nearest hundred, it could round to 1,300. Either are acceptable. For my estimate, I'm quickly multiplying 3 times 1,000 for a guess of 3,000, or if I'm taking my hundreds place, which I got 1,300 because the 7 in the tens place is higher than 5, I round it up. I do 1,300 times 3. 3 times 0, 0, 0. 3 times 3 is 9, and 3 times 1 is 3. I estimate that Ada will walk between 3,000 and 3,900 steps. You can only use one of those as your estimate, but we want to quickly solve this in our head so that we know what ballpark our answer should be in. Now that we have an estimate for how far we think she's going to walk, we're going to take it step by step and multiplying to figure out what 1,274 times 3 equals. First step we do is we multiply our ones. We multiply 3 times 4. That gives us a product of 12. I put my 2 down here in the ones place, and I regroup the 10 ones in the 12 as 110 and put it over that 7 tens. Next step, I multiply by my tens. I multiply 3 times 7, which gives me a product of 21. I then add the regrouped number of tens, which is 1, for a total of 22 tens. I'll place my 2 down here in the tens section, and I will regroup my higher 2, my 20 tens, to equal 200. Next, I multiply by my hundreds. I multiply 3 times 2, which gives me 600. Then I add in my regrouped hundreds. I have 2 hundreds there. So I have 600 plus 200 for a total of 800s. I put my 8 down here, and I move on to my next step. What is 3 times 1? Giving me a product of 3. This means that Ada walked a total of 3,822 steps. Question C asks, how do we know this answer of 3,822 steps is reasonable? This is asking us, when we estimated, did we get close to this number? And yes, this is a reasonable answer because, yes, this is a reasonable answer because it's not far from our estimate. Or it is close to our estimate of 3,900. Next, moving on to page 18, we have another step it out problem. Number 2. Michael walks to and from school each day. The round trip total is 4,206 feet. What is the total distance that he walks to and from school in 5 days? First off, we want to estimate our total. We can either round to the nearest thousands or to the nearest hundreds place. For this problem, I'm going to round 4,206 feet to the nearest thousand of 4,000. So I'm estimating 4,000 times 5. Like we've been practicing, count up the number of zeros that I have, then multiply my first digits. 4 times 5 gives me a product of 20. I estimate that Michael will walk about 20,000 steps, approximately. Jason is solving the problem on his own. His solution is shown. Work through the steps to solve the problem and then determine what error Jason made. First off, we multiply by the ones. 5 times 6 gives me a product of 30. I put my 0 in the ones place and carry the 3 tens over to the tens place. Then I multiply the tens. 5 times 0 gives me a product of 0. And then I add in 3. 0 plus 3 gives me 3. Next, I multiply my hundreds. 5 times 2 gives me 10. I place a 0 in the hundreds place and carry a 1 to my thousands place. Lastly, I multiply 5 times 4,000 for 20,000 plus 1 for a total of 21,030 feet. If we look at Jason's problem, we see that he has a solution of 21,300. And we can see that when he regrouped, he moved the 3 tens over to the hundreds place and not the tens place. So Jason's error was Jason regrouped the 3 tens into the hundreds place. For today's activity, we are going to be doing the odd numbers of Check for Understanding and On Your Own. Starting with problem number 1, where we are multiplying 868 times 4. Before I begin, I want to make a quick estimate as to what I think the product will be. To do this, I'm going to round to the nearest hundreds place. I refer to the number in my tens place, which is greater than 5, which means that for my estimate, I'm going to round up to 900. My estimate of 900 times 4 will have it that our product should be approximately 3,600. Now, I actually multiply out 868 times 4, starting with my ones. 4 times 8 gives me a product of 32. I carry my 3 over to my tens. 4 times 6 is 24, plus 3 gives me a 7, and I carry my 2 over top of my 800. Lastly, I multiply by my hundreds. 4 times 8 is 32 again, plus 2 gives me 3,472. While this may not be exactly 3,600, this is a good answer because it is reasonable to think that 900 times 4 would be a little higher than 868 times 4. Moving on to problem number 3, multiplying 9,372 times 7. Starting with an estimate, I'm going to round to my nearest thousands place value. To do so, I look to my hundreds place value, which is less than 5, which means I stay the same with my estimate and round it to 9,000. Approximately 9,000 times 7 would give me a product close to 63,000. Now that I have an estimate for this, I'm going to multiply this out, starting with my ones place. 7 times 2 gives me a product of 14. I put my 4 down in the ones and regroup the 10 ones as a 110 over my 7. Then I multiply 7 times 7 for 49, plus an additional 1 gives me 50. I put a 0 down here and carry a 5 over to my 3. Then I multiply 7 times 3 for a product of 21, and I add in 5 for 26. I put my 6 down here in the hundreds place and carry a 2 to my thousands. Lastly, I multiply 7 times 9, which gives me a product of 63, plus 2 gives me a total product of 65,604. This is relatively close to the estimate of 63,000. Remember, when we're estimating, it does not need to be spot on what we are doing. It just needs to be close or relative to the number that we are looking for. All right, moving on to page 19. Sticking with the odd numbers, we are going to be doing problems 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, and 15. Starting with problem number 5, I see that I need to estimate, so I'm going to round 915 to the nearest hundred. This rounds down, or stays the same, I should say, as 900. 900 times 3 would give me a product of 2,700. So now I multiply out, starting with my ones. 3 times 5 gives me 15. I carry a 1 over into my tens category. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 gives me 4. And then lastly, I multiply times my hundreds place. 3 times 9 gives me a product of 27. My total product is 2,745, and this is reasonable because we estimated that it would be 2,700. Question number 7, I am multiplying 4,306 times 4. I'm going to quickly estimate by guessing 4,000, rounding down or staying the same, times 4, which would give me a product of 16,000. Now that I've done my quick estimate, I multiply by ones. 4 times 6 gives me 24. I place my 4 in the ones, carry my 2 to my tens. I multiply my tens. 4 times 0 gives me 0, plus 2, I put my 2 here. Now I do 4 times 300, which gives me a product of 12. I put my 2 down here in my hundreds and carry a 1 over to my thousands. Lastly, I multiply 4 times 4,000, which gives me a total of 16,000, plus 1,000, add it together, gives me a total product of 17,224. This is close to our estimate of 16,000. These are reasonable answers. Question number 9. I'm now multiplying 8,926 times 5. I start by estimating by rounding 8,926 to the nearest thousand. This would round up to 9,000. I multiply 9,000 times 5, which gives me an approximate answer of 45,000. Now that I have an estimate, I'm going to multiply starting with my ones. 5 times 6 gives me 30. I place my 0 in the ones and carry my 3 to my tens. I multiply 5 times 2 for a product of 10, plus 3 gives me 13. I place my 3 down in my tens category and carry a 1 into my hundreds. I now multiply 5 times 9, which gives me 45, plus 1, for a total of 46. I place the 6 down in the hundreds and carry my 4 into my thousands. Lastly, I multiply 5 times 8 for 40,000, plus another 4,000 for 44,000. Our actual product is 44,630. This is reasonable, as we estimated that the total product would be approximately 45,000. Question number 11. We need to figure out what the blank box here represents. So we're going to multiply 438 times 7 to figure out what the missing digit here is. We can either use the format that they have here, or on our scratch paper, write out 438 times 7 and figure out what that missing number is. Starting with 1 times 1, we have 7 times 8 gives us 56. I carry my 5 over here into my tens place. 7 times 3 is 21, plus an additional 5 makes it 26, so I carry over a 2 into my hundreds place. Lastly, I have 7 times 4, which gives me a product of 28 plus 2 equals 30. Following this, it looks as though the missing number that fills this box is 0 to make it 3,066. Problem number 13, I have multiple missing boxes to fill in. 5,000 blank 134 times 9 equals 40,800 and blank blank. Starting off now, I multiply my 9 times my 4. This gives me 36. 6 goes into the ones, and I carry my 3 tens over to my tens category. Next, I multiply 9 times 3, which gives me 27. I add in my additional 3 for a 30. I carry my 3 over to my hundreds, and now I need to figure out what missing number will fill in this blank. To help me out with this, I've gotten my 6, my 0, and I know that this number in my hundreds needs to equal an 8 when I add it to a 3. In thinking about my multiples of 9, anything that will add up to 8 with a 3 must have a 5 at the end of it. There is only one multiple of 9 that ends in a 5, and that is 45 if I multiply times 5. So 9 times 5 gives me 45. I add in my additional 3, which I turn into my 8 down here, and I carry my 4 over here. Lastly, I now multiply 9 times 5,000. 9 times 5 is 45, plus an additional 4,000, makes it a total of 49,806. My missing numbers were a 5, a 9, a 0, and a 6. On to question number 15. A farmer has a cornfield with 9 rows of corn. Each row has 1,026 corn plants. How many total corn plants does he have? To figure this out, we are multiplying 1,026 times 9. We start by multiplying our ones, so 9 times 6 gives me a product of 54. I put my 4 down in my ones place and carry my 5 over into my tens place. I multiply 9 times 2, which gives me 18. 18 plus 5 is 23. I put my 3 down in my tens place and carry my 2 over into my hundreds. I now multiply 9 times 0 hundreds, which gives me 0. I add in my 2 hundreds that I carried for a 2. Lastly, I multiply 9 times 1,000, which gives me a product of 9,234 corn plants. To finish off today's lesson, we're going to be doing problems 17 and 19. We're going to do these on the worksheet pages 20, as we are provided with enough space. For number 17, this is a health and fitness question. Darlene walks around her neighborhood. Her daily goal is to walk 4,000 steps. Does Darlene reach her daily goal if she walks around her neighborhood 5 times? Make an estimate to our answer to answer the question and show our work. In this diagram, it says that 1 lap around her neighborhood is 852 steps. If she walks around it 5 times, will she reach her daily goal of 4,000? For this, I'm going to round this to the nearest hundred. 852 will round up to 900 as the tens place is a 5 or greater. So for my estimate, I'm multiplying 900 times 5. 5 times 0 gives me a product of 0. 5 times 0, another 0, and then 5 times 9 equals 45. Based off my estimate, I do believe that Darlene can reach her daily goal. So based on my estimate, she should be able to reach her goal. How many steps does Darlene take if she walks around her neighborhood 5 times? Now we are actually multiplying 852 times 5. I start by multiplying my ones. 5 times 2 gives me 10. I place a 0 in the ones and carry a 1 over to my 5 tens. I multiply 5 times 5 tens to give me a product of 25 plus 1 equals 26. Place my 6 in the tens and carry my 2 over my 8 hundreds. Lastly, I do 5 times 800, which gives me 4,000 plus 2, or 42. She walks 4,260 steps, well over her daily goal of 4,000. Problem 19. Francisco shows a multiplication problem, but he makes an error. What error does he make, and what is the correct answer? Francisco is multiplying 4,315 times 8, and he came up with a product of 34,420. So, this is Francisco's work as it appears on page 20. Now, we're going to multiply and see if we can find where Francisco went wrong. We start by multiplying our ones. 8 times 5 gives us a product of 40. We put the 0 down in the ones place and carry our 4 into our tens place. We multiply 8 times 1, which gives us a product of 8. Then we add on the additional 4 tens, which gives us 12. We carry the 1 over to our 3's. Then we multiply 8 times 300. 8 times 300 is 2,400 plus an additional 1 for 25. And then we carry our 2 over to our thousands place. Last, we do 8 times 4,000. 8 times 4 is 32 plus an additional 2 gives us 34. Our solution is 34,520. Whereas Francisco wound up with 34,420. The problem appears here in our hundreds category, where it looks as though Francisco did not regroup the additional 1 from our tens category. So Francisco's problem is he did not regroup the 10 tens into the hundreds place value. This concludes our video on HMH into math for 5th grade. I'm Mr. Chambers, and I thank you for taking the time to watch this video to improve your math skills. And I look forward to speaking to you again in our next lesson, where we will be covering Module 1, Lesson 5.